evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege from the India Mobile Congress and the COI in India to welcome you to this webinar on telecom cloud frontiers for network transformation. As you all would be expecting, this is a very interesting topic, and we have for you a set of very eminent and distinguished panelists. Uh, we have with us Mr. David Stokes, who's the Senior Manager Solutions at Ribbon Communications, Mr. Suresh Sundaram, who's the Senior Vice President at Mavenir, and Samar Mittal joins us from Nokia, where he is the Software Market India Head. And we have Mr. Ryan Perera, who's the Vice President and Country Head for Ciena, and of course, Sandeep Dhingra, who's from STL Sterlite Technologies. He heads the Network Software and Services Division. So with this eminent panel, it is but obvious that all of us are looking at what the emerging technologies that are being deployed the world over, and India is not going to be, far behind. So as we see communication services emerging and evolving with increasing demand for higher latencies, lower speeds, and a huge amount of digital transformation, it is but necessary and important for the telecom service providers to look at what features and what services they had from the telecom cloud, and what services or new revenue opportunities can come their way with this new set of technologies coming up. Every day we hear about mobile edge computing and 5G, Industry 4.0. So all these are aspects which obviously are dependent on cloud services that are so important. And as we see, we will request all the panelists to share their thoughts with a particular focus on India, of course, but also share their experiences from their companies they have globally. And service providers who are providing communications as a service, the cloud would allow them to expand their offerings to different platforms, whether it's information or platforms or software and security as well. Now, with that, I would now turn to our first panelist, that's Suresh from Mavenir. And Suresh, could you share your thoughts on how the cloud environment has evolved so far? And what do you think would be the role of telcos in transforming customer challenges? Suresh?
Thank you. And it's a pleasure joining this panel, at India Mobile Congress. And thanks for having me here. My name is Suresh from Mavenir Systems. With regard to your question about, what's been happening in the telco and the cloud space broadly, what we are seeing is a very unique transformation of sorts. There is a telco touch to the cloud that's been happening with the advent of 5G rollout, be it greenfield implementation or brownfield migration or evolution type implementation, so to say. And there is a cloud touch to the telco space that's been happening, which is even more significant, so to say. And broadly, if you look at it, any industry for that matter, be it finance, insurance, agriculture, retail, commerce, it's been going through that digital evolution over the last couple of decades. Including streaming media industries and every other industry for that matter. And, telco is actually joining that bandwagon, in terms of evolution to the cloud. Broadly, what we've observed is, one of three things. If you look at any workload or any, application or service that we offer to our consumers today, it dotes on one of the three types of application services. One is an always on type service, which is like, a classic example of that is what you see today with the 5G new radio, for example. A transactional type service, which is your significant heavy backend services, API type transactions, and so on. And then there is your backend batch services, which is like running your customer service systems, your CRM, your audit, your revenue assurance, and every other OSS, BSS systems that comes together. When we take a look at each and every product, service, function, and application out there, and look at how we evolve them to the cloud, it requires a certain degree of treatment. And it is important for us as the telco service provider to provide a level playing field when it comes to operating all of these applications and services. One thing that I've observed, and one thing that we've been trying to closely look at, trying to solve the problem as we go towards the 5G implementation, is what I call the paradigm of many of one and one of many. Many of one, for example, is what you have like a radio type implementation. There is this single software suite of applications, virtualized and containerized, such as the CUs and the DUs, that comes together to form the radio unit, the radio software, so to say. And we're going to have tens and thousands of implementations across the footprint. So you have the challenge of many of one there. And when it comes to these radio type specific implementations, you're going to run all these workloads at the edge, which means the infrastructure that is available, be it the compute, the storage, the network, the access, all of those aspects are going to be very slim to none. And in terms of deploying, orchestrating a change to the field, a rolling software upgrade without as impacting an impact to the customer, end customer experience, and so on, the challenge starts becoming multifold. The other aspect of this paradigm that I just called out is the one of many equation. As the evolved packet code or any of the backend that is involved in a service delivery ecosystem gets transformed from being a monolith to a microservice-based architecture, where you have several core functions and microservices that comes together to deliver the core services, you're going to have this one of many challenge. How you're going to manage the ecosystem of several microservices in terms of deploying them, in terms of configurations, in terms of scaling them in the field, and so on and so forth, brings another aspect to this. Now, let's assume that we've built and brought all of these ecosystem elements together. The day two operations in terms of providing a seamless service to our customer becomes paramount and very important in these equations. That's where a player like Mavenir comes together to provide what we call as the PaaS, the platform as a service layer, which provides a greenfield deployment and a view of all of the services in play, using our observability framework, using the mesh framework that we have, and so on and so forth. A litmus test to a challenge of such large-scale implementation could be the feedback loop in terms of how we can detect a sub-second failure and how we can remediate that failure in a matter of a second or two, and provide that services, the seamless service that we want to have to our customers. If you put all of this together, it provides all the challenge that we want to see in the ecosystem today. And players across the globe, be it greenfield or brownfield implementation, are getting ready to take the plunge in the cloud, if you will. And we are excited to be part of this in this industry at this evolving phase of time.
Hey, Suresh, thank you so much. I think that's very interesting, some of the challenges and, one of many aspect. So what is very important is obviously that, all the telcos would be looking at how can you provide a new service but still, manage costs. So with that, I'd, now turn to Samar from Nokia, because, Nokia has so many of these global networks already on commercial 5G. So, Samar, can you share, for how a telco cloud could change the cost structure of network service production?
Yeah, thanks, Vikram. It's thanks for this opportunity to be part of this event and the panelists that we have today. So really thanks. And in terms of the question that you have from telco cloud, as Suresh already highlighted a couple of points. So I'll start with cloud has been transforming the networks, as we already seen the frontier foot network transformation as part of the panelists here, in terms of various forms. if you go back 10, 12 years, we used to have proprietary hardware on the core side from almost all the network providers. Today you have open hardware, right? So in terms of any hardware which can be deployed, which could be IT, which could be telco, which could be from anywhere, in terms of agility and transformation, that was the first transformation which came in terms of the way the core and other applications and services are getting deployed in the marketplace. So that's the first form in terms of agility, as well as the cost improvisation to your question. As any technology has its journey, so it started from the hardware neutral perspective. It's moving into much more agile, containerized services, and specifically when it comes to 5G. In 5G, you need to have network slicing, you need to have services on demand, you need to serve people not only at a regional level from regional cloud or central cloud, but also from edge clouds, because there will be various applications that will be coming in the marketplace, which will have dependency on latency, which means they'll demand low latency and high resolution contents in various applications. If you talk about remote surgeries, if you talk about autonomous cars, and stuff around it. Even the local content is becoming very relevant in a diversified country like India. So there'll be three dimensions to the cloud, which is edge, regional, and central. And all three provide its own values in terms of improvisation on cost, because at an edge level, you can have small servers, small clouds, maybe hundreds of servers, and serving local content, local applications, depending upon the requirements that they have. In terms of regional clouds, again, you can amalgamate a lot of services together, and that leads to serving from the same cloud multiple applications, multiple use cases, and also handling operational perspectives centrally. And then you have the central cloud, which is much more data mining, data analytics, things which can be done remotely and are not dependent on high latency or bandwidth, can be remotely managed. So that's one perspective which brings in a lot of synergies in terms of costs and even in terms of services, because if you look at the OPEX, CAPEX, and time to market, these have been the three pillars in the telecom industry when any new technology has been evolved. And from all three perspectives, distributed cloud strategy helps in managing CAPEX, in managing OPEX in terms of sites, and also getting agility in terms of delivering services. Specifically to containerization as you move into from VNFs to CNFs. And at Nokia, as we've taken the journey a decade back from where it was to where it is today, we have developed applications both in containerized forms, in cloud native forms, and also keeping into this edge, regional, and central cloud perspectives as well. Our applications and solutions are open to any hardware, which brings in the cost improvisation as we move ahead into 5G, wherein network slicing and services on demand will become very, very relevant. And in COVID days, as we are today, the need for the market and end consumers are very different from what it used to be, a year back. And once you have such kind of agility in the network, it helps to change the solutions as required from a specific market. Mr. Suresh also touched upon the complexity that it brings in when you add these kind of streams, these kind of technologies, when you're doing a lot of things on the fly. And that's where the closed loop automation, comes into perspective big time, and artificial intelligence, security perspective, because security has become very relevant in the marketplace, especially when we are working from home these days, and a lot of virtual reality topics, augmented reality, use cases, wherein people are getting trained sitting at their homes. Imagine a factory or an industry teaching their people sitting at home how much security in terms of content they would need to have. So security also becomes a very relevant and an important, topic. And that's where the solutions that we provide on the security side also helps in developing the cloud into a very different platform, which can be utilized in many forms and shapes. Lastly, in terms of services, as you mentioned, from 5G and our global implementation, considering the network knowledge that we bring in, considering the requirements that various operators have globally, we have developed a lot of solutions around automation. We call it orchestration layer. We call it provisioning layers. We call it closed loop artificial intelligence perspectives. All those things also become very relevant when we are providing telecom services towards the service providers and even the end consumers. So with three pillars in mind, which is CapEx, OpEx, and time to market, neutrality in terms of hardware, tongue twister there, in terms of hardware, which helps developing applications by one and all. Imagine an IT cloud which is getting deployed at the back end. Usually IT clouds are big size clouds deployed at the back end to take care of data centers and stuff around it. If you have neutral hardware, the same cloud can be sliced depending upon the utilization that you need to have from a marketplace, and same thing can be done with smaller clouds at the edge level. So with these three perspectives, closed loop automation and security, we at Nokia believe the cloud strategy, the solution will become very, very relevant, and we leapfrog as a technology, as an industry, into very different stream as we move ahead. And innovation through cloud can see different heights and provides a lot of values to the end consumer, industry, and the service providers as well.
Hey, Samar, thank you very much. I think, you touched very important points, both, the CapEx, OpEx, and, how telcos can examine offering the, more optimized and cost structure wise. Obviously, that leads us to the question is that, what is the role of strategy and planning, and obviously the implementation processes that should support the emergence of the telco cloud capability. With that, I'll turn to Ryan. Ryan, you would be speaking to many of the potential telco cloud partners as well as the telcos. So your thoughts on this? You have to unmute yourself, Ryan.
Thank you, Vikram. Thanks for having me on this panel. So let me build on what Suresh and Samar talked about. But before I get into strategy, let me touch on the background a little bit. We see telco cloud not so much as a frontier, but more of a necessary evolution for the telcos, if they are to really prevent an existential crisis. Why I say that? If you look back last several years, the return on capital investment by the operators are in single digit in India. So you heard from Suresh earlier on, the importance of having a very purpose-built distributed cloud architecture in order to run telcos' internal network functions and their IT functions. So we believe, and then we are seeing this already, telcos are really focusing on the telco cloud mainly for their internal network functions and its virtualization. So not just in India, but across the globe, that's our primary observation. And on the public cloud front, of course, they dominated the public cloud. And of course, there's no shortage of hype when it comes to edge computing. But we believe edge computing is a natural extension of core clouds. And we believe the public cloud giants will continue to dominate in the edge cloud space. And of course, we're seeing increasing collaboration between telcos and content players in that space. And some of those announcements are already being made here in India. Now, if I drill down to the whole strategy and the implementation, we're in the business of providing the networking underlay for both public clouds as well as for telco clouds. We look at this problem in two parts, content to content and user to content. Content to content is core networking. This is connecting data centers within metros, across long distance networks. Over the last couple of years, we've done several hundred terabits of network interconnectivity here in India, and that just continued to grow. We're beginning to see the web scalers building their own data centers and the tremendous increase in the capacity need. It was predominantly within metros. Now we're beginning to see across long distance networks as well. Of course, The other aspect I should mention is international capacity, subsea capacity. I think from an India standpoint, content to content place is fairly well advanced, and so much has been done. Of course, there will be more capacity increments. But the place we believe that more work is needed, more strategy is needed, is really this user to content. These are the on-ramps. Again, no one single technology. You got wireless, and wireline techniques. We believe this is where lots of growth and so much innovation has to happen. In the previous discussion, Samar talked about the importance of slicing. This is really the policy-based, on-demand quality of service. We believe this is going to be a major area of growth in coming years, particularly if you have to provide the right level of experience to the both enterprises and as well as for the consumers. I guess broadly, those are the two implementation areas we as a company are working very closely with, not just telcos, but also with the content players. Back to you, Vikram.
Thanks. I think that's really helping the discussion along. And, one of the important parts, of course, is that, as you say, telcos themselves seeing how ready they are. And one of an important aspect of the telcos' readiness themselves, both for the internal processes as well as offering services on telco cloud, is a part of, how important is digital transformation both within and outside. And with that, I'd request, fellow panelist David from Ribbon to dwell on this aspect and how digital transformation of telcos would help to exploit full potential of these future technologies. David?
Thank you, Vikram. And it's great to be back here on a panel at IMC, albeit virtually in my bedroom. And I get to miss India. It's a great shame. Digital transformation. Really, really key. For two tightly coupled reasons. One, to allow the service providers to take advantage of the new technologies and the new architectures that Suresh and Samar mentioned. And also with those technologies in place to tackle this existential problem that Ryan mentioned, you need these new technologies to start driving costs down, and you need to do the digital transformation to achieve that. The other reason why you need digital transformation is so that the telcos can address a whole raft of new services. And we see the emergence of e-health and e-education and e-commerce being important globally, but very, very important in the Indian market. And there needs to be this transformation to allow the network to be in place so it drives down the cost for connectivity to allow everybody in India to actually enjoy the benefits of e-health and e-education. And of course, with the e-commerce, it gives telcos the opportunity to enter new markets and drive revenue streams up. So it's not only about driving CapEx and OpEx down, it's about driving revenue and revenue opportunities up. So what is the key bits of this, the transformation? As I see it, there's three main areas. First is the automation of the network. In all cloud environments, you need an automated environment. Now, when you started back at the data centers 10, 15 years ago, you were able to automatically configure the virtual machines between white box servers within the data center. That now moves out into the wide area network, and you need the automation to allocate capacity, connectivity, compute to the right places in the network. And key to those sort of environments are network functions virtualization and software-defined networking, SDN. And the Indian operators that we're working with are already well down the track of implementing NFV and SDN. In fact, one of the major operators we are working with has already started to implement RSDN type technology in their 4G network it becomes a logical step to move that forwards into the 5G network. The next area that I think is really, really key is how do you make that really quite dirty is the wrong word, but that plumbing infrastructure of IP and optical transport, how do you move that into the cloud environment? Well, again, NFV and SDN help you there, where instead of having nailed up connections from point A to point B, you can start to take advantage of some cloud type techniques, as I mentioned before, with the programmability, to start having one homogeneous set of resources, NFVs, PNF, sorry, virtual network functions, physical network functions, and cloud network functions, have all those as a set of resource pools and allocate them where you require them in the network to support a service. And that's where the concept of slicing comes in. You allocate those resources where they're required to create a slice for the given service that you want. And that slice might be a best effort slice, as you would with internet broadband connectivity, or it might be a really, really secure slice that needs guaranteed low latency that you might give to a private network who are implementing the private network for cloud networks. So really, really important. The whole of the IP and optical transport network is transforming, and we at Ribbon are really, really, really driving the network slicing and the low latency aspects of that. Then the third area is mobile edge compute and analytics. As we mentioned, the cloud is now, I think all the previous speakers have mentioned, the cloud's now moving out from a centralized data centers, moving out across the network. As Mr. Samar mentioned, they're moving to regional data centers and edge data centers. And at the edge data centers, when you put compute there, you're able to drive low latency to a minimum if you need to. You're able to analyze the network at point of access if that's required. So again, another example, we've been working with one of our large service providers on data collection from the edge of the network using mobile edge compute technology. And this is generating a whole set of analytics and actionable intelligence that they can use to drive their network forwards. So in short, digital transformation, absolutely key for global service providers, but India in particular, to help bridge that digital divide and deal with e-health, e-education and e-commerce and move that forwards.
Hey, David, thank you very much. One of the things that we did at COAI was we had to make a presentation to the Parliamentary Committee on IT. And one of the recommendations was, having a digital readiness index of sectors. You see, when you mention education or commerce or otherwise, because digital transformation, okay, telcos will obviously be, doing it based on their needs. But across sectors, because 5G is way beyond telecom, is something that, there was a discussion on that. Well, with that, a very important part that comes up to my mind next is, the role of system integrators in stitching all this together. And, no better a person and a company like, Sterlite Technologies and Sandeep, I'm sure you'd be very keen to share your thoughts on that. Over to you, Sandeep.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm really, really happy to be here today and really enjoyed what other panelists said. I mostly agreed, and I'll try to see if I don't repeat what they've already said. So let me start with what is it we are talking about in terms of telco cloud. In a simpler way, I would say we are saying that having cloud-like capability in a private cloud that is owned and operated by a telco, right? That's what it is. What does it really mean? It means to have cloud native environment. Cloud native environment basically means cloud native applications and cloud native infrastructure, right? Now, this transformation is absolutely necessary. I think it was Ryan who said it is existential. Let me just qualify that a little bit more. Besides that, technology like 5G require these kind of transformation. You cannot achieve that kind of scale or capabilities like slicing without this. But there is also intense competitive pressure. One pressure is coming out from the hyperscalers, cloud providers. They are getting more and more into the network domain with their cloud native capabilities, specifically around the edge. Look at Azure edge zones or Google or AWS, Wavelength. All of these are basically coming more and more into network. I mean, we have vendors using cloud providers for SD-WAN, cloud hyperscalers using their own network, whether it is through Express Link or something, really bypassing the telco, really. So that is one area of competition. Then the second competition is for telcos who have actually transformed. There are, few, let's say, one in Japan and one in India. Now they are able to provide services more agility in a more agile way, faster. They can add additional services besides the traditional ones, and more importantly, they can have at a pricing driving this existential threat that one of my panelists mentioned. Right. So this transformation is must. It needs to happen now, and Indian telcos are also moving in that direction. Now, I'll try and get to maybe one more level of details. What does really, let's say, cloud native environment transformation mean, right? Let's say from infrastructure perspective, from application perspective, you basically move from monolithic to microservices based architecture, put that Lego block, have a services mesh. That is one area of transformation. Again, then the infrastructure piece, you have to look at cloud transformation is not going to be in one part of the network. It is going to be end to end. You have to look at the core, you have to look at the edge, you have to look at even the access network, right? And in there, you get the edge data center, regional data center, and the core data center that we talked about. That will be undergoing the CNDC transformation, right? So that is first requirement. Second, you have to look at from physical to virtual. So you have to look at from physical to SDN, NFV, VNF, CNF. That is one area of transformation. On top of that, cloud native requires that microservices or CNF that you're talking about is containerized, right? And those set of containers are orchestrated with something like Kubernetes. And then you basically deploy or employ uh, the cloud DevOps or DevNetOps model. This is what is required from a CNDC. Now, in many of these scenarios, let's say it is not, it is also going to be a hybrid environment. That is, a private cloud will need to work in a multi-cloud environment, working for various uh, uh, collaborations with the hyperscalers and other PCs. Specifically in the edge piece, somebody said that yes, I think hyperscalers are really moving aggressively, and they definitely have a very good chance. But in some use cases, even edge, there is a need for a cloud agnostic multi-cloud edge that is more attuned to that specific vertical physical requirement, right? So that is the other piece. Now, if you look at this, an end-to-end multi-cloud, in some cases, cloud environment, native cloud agnostic environment, a cloud native environment, this is a complex and a broad area of solution stitching that is needed. So system integrators are required. They will play a significant role in this multi-technology, multi-vendor, and many times, multi-cloud environment where you would have physical, virtual, and cloud native infrastructure together, right? So a system integrator that has the ecosystem and broader capabilities to stitch this solution together and then potentially manage and operate this as well in some cases. That is something that would be required. Now for that, even system integrators need to evolve. See, system integrators have been focused on either the infrastructure piece a lot or the application piece a lot. Now, cloud native merges those boundaries, right? When you containerize a CNF, you don't only have to look at just the virtual machine, but you have to look at the operating system. You have to look at the binaries, the libraries that would be needed, the versions. So there is the skills level that is needed, skill level that is needed, has multiple uh, application element as well. So in terms of system integrators, that has capabilities for end-to-end for the entire network architecture, from physical, virtual to SDN, LFE to cloud native to containerization and orchestration. Uh, also to be able to work in a multi-vendor environment, and potentially in this case, many cases, open source hybrid cloud environment. That is the kind of system integrator will be successful in my mind. And this is what we are doing at STL. So we have a division that is focused on ORAN, which basically we have our own solution with the containerized CUDU, as somebody else mentioned as well. We have a system integration unit where we are transforming data centers to cloud native data centers. We in a multi-cloud hybrid cloud environment, and we have software division where we have our own PSS platform. We have our own um, marketplace for CNFs that we recently came out with. So that is our strategy. That's where we are headed to transform uh, our telco customers to the telco cloud environment. And that is something that I think would be very important moving forward in this transformation.
Hey, Sandeep, thanks. I think that was very interesting because putting it all together is what they say, the whole synchronization of the overall effort, right? With that, now I'll cycle back to you, Suresh, and how at Mavenir you're looking at how the NFV and the SDN systems can meet commitments, and particularly service level agreements and QoS commitments of high reliability. So if you could dwell on that a bit.
Absolutely. Performance and throughput are two key aspects as we design our applications and systems. And as we try to virtualize, as we try to containerize them, the fact that, we need to sustain that velocity, sustain that throughput, sustain that performance becomes a very key aspect, in order to provide, like I call, a seamless service to, the telco service providers. As we go along, the path of containerizing, one of the key, levers that we've implemented is to create a framework, an observability framework that can look at the data behind all of these SDNs and NFV functions, try and stitch the data, make some meaningful information out of it, such as generate the KPIs, compare it with the thresholds that we want to sustain, that we want to live with. And as soon as we exceed or meet near the threshold, raise warnings and alerts so that the subsequent systems or, the interdependencies between the various systems are managed in a very seamless way. And like I called out earlier, one of the litmus tests of this sustained performance is to look at, how can we detect these failures in sub-second, and how we can address or remediate these failures in a matter of second or two. That's very key here. And there's a lot of parallels that we can draw from the cloud industry, the cloud ecosystems. If you look at the evolution of the compute and how high availability of the compute systems are provided today, we can draw a very similar scale of parallels to the network industry as well. And in terms of providing those high performance and high throughput is going to be very essential and very key for SDNs and NFVs. Vikram.
Hey, thanks, Suresh. I think that's a very important part. And with that, I'll turn to you now, Suresh. At Nokia, what is your experience, or what you're looking at, managing to integrate, the NFV and SDN network with the legacy networks, and what challenges or what suggestions do you have?
Yeah, Vikram, thanks. This is Samar. I think maybe in terms
sorry.
of that's fine. That's fine. In terms of your question of complexities of integrating, as Suresh mentioned, on the SDN and the NFVI, yes, any new technologies, right? Any new technology that you introduce, imagine we've been running the legacy networks for more than 2 decades, give or take, right? When this NFVI and SDN technology came into foreplay from that standpoint. So from that perspective, it will be complex, no denials about it. However, that's wherein lie the opportunities, because the savings and the efficiency and the revenue generating perspectives that it can bring in once you are able to integrate the NFVI layer with the SDN, because orchestration, closed loop automation, slicing of networks, on demand services, on demand content. So the benefits that it brings in, sometimes you need to really eat or swallow the bitter pill once. Once you do so, then things starts to become much more positive as you move ahead. And we really believe with the services arm that we have, not only in the country but globally as well, the R&D centers that we have, and of course the neutral perspective that Nokia brings in into these kind of integrations. We believe, yes, it's a tough perspective for operators to initially figure out that how they will transform their networks. But then, you can always do it in pieces, as in where the initial, which is the metros specifically in India and bigger cities, where the relevance of these solutions will be much more critical initially, and the success also will be critical, and time to market and the revenue generation in terms of ROI will also help to feed the transformation into the network. So bottom line, yes, it will be complex, no denials. However, with the learnings, experience, and the ecosystem and the standards that we have around these integrations, I think it's feasible. And the benefits that it brings in to the operators, industry, and the end consumers will be far-reaching to transform the existing networks into a much more autonomous, automated, and closed loop service, how to say, agnostic solutions with the technologies on the radio side coming into play, which is 5G, will yield huge benefits to the market.
Hey, thanks, Samar. So interesting. Obviously, everybody's looking at, increasing monetization with new tools at their behest. So with that, like I asked you the planning part, Ryan, earlier. So Ryan, in your views, what strategies do you think that operators can use to monetize the telco cloud? And how can telco clouds help generate some new revenue streams? Unmute.
All right. Okay. Your monetization question. Perhaps we see monetization in two parts. I touched on that earlier on. First, the biggest opportunity part we see is how can operators monetize the cloud on-ramp, the user to content. People argue that this is probably the last remaining piece for telcos to monetize, because they have the exclusive control of the on-ramps, access networks. So there's definitely a lot of potential for monetization there. Again, it boils down to policy-based, on-demand quality of service or slice delivery. A lot of work going on in that space. For example, using techniques like segment routing with the centralized path computation engines does give you the ability for operators to deliver different quality of services which are differently priced. We believe that's arguably the biggest scope for monetization. And then you asked the question about monetizing the telco cloud. Again, I'm sure there are opportunities, but we see telco cloud more as a way to cost reduce for the operators, where they can run their network functions like Suresh talked about a lot earlier on. How do they significantly cost reduce? I'll leave you with one little data point. In India, operators make about $30 to $34 billion revenue today, right? But still, over the last many years, single-digit return on capital invested. 70% of that cost is on RAN. So the operators have to find a way to reduce that cost significantly. So we see telco cloud more as a cost reduction technique.
Oh, super. So I think that's a very important point. Yes. And, this whole Open RAN movement is headed in a direction that would certainly facilitate, reduction on the RAN side of costs. With that, I'll come back to you, David. You mentioned about commerce and education. So how do you see, new software-defined everything affecting the telcos?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think the first point is to say that if you start with thinking of 5G as just another G, you're absolutely starting for the wrong place. As Samir mentioned, it's very different, and you're going to have to swallow a bitter pill, he mentioned, and try to revisit and reimagine the way the network works. And we've discussed that over the last few minutes. So what you need now is to be able to take that best effort mobile telco network and provide the low cost, as Ryan mentioned, low cost network infrastructure, put it in place that can meet the requirements of the services, both for education and for health and e-commerce that we mentioned. Within the e-commerce space, there'll be certain networks looking for private networks, very, very secure, very, very low latency, all want very, very hard isolation and security of their networks. Other smaller SMBs will be looking for some sort of mixture between deterministic behavior and best effort. And this is where SRTE that Ryan mentioned fits in. And then others still will be somewhere in the middle. So I think it's a new generation, it's a new world. 5G and the network behind it isn't just another G. It's the place to start enabling these new technologies again that help us bridge this digital divide, and countries that embrace it will be able to compete with other countries much, much more effectively.
Thanks, David. In fact, that's the whole idea. Sometimes, in many discussions, one just thinks of, 5G being spoken of as some more bandwidth or, some more speeds, but it certainly is not that. It is how it would transform completely the way you work. In fact, one of the examples that I use is the way you looked at transportation completely changed when you got the marriage of the mobile smartphone and the internet, and it just gave rise to so many different ways of looking at transportation or accommodation. And so 5G obviously has a huge potential in doing all that. With that, Sandeep, you mentioned about hyperscalers and their impact and the challenge that they would have, the telcos versus hyperscalers. Could you dwell a little more on that?
Oh, absolutely. But just let me first add one more point to monetization, if I may. Right? I think I agree with Ryan and everybody else that mentioned. But I think if we look at telco cloud, that includes edge cloud as well, and look at holistically, 5G and IoT together. What it does is it opens up new enterprise market to multiple use cases. Now there are hundreds of use cases. Not everything is going to work for telcos and Indian telcos, but there are definitely these opportunities. First time a new market is open for monetization. So that's something that I think telcos are looking into. Now with hyperscalers, see, what I think is last time around, let's say go here like 10 years back, right? When the OTTs came, right? Telcos were kind of reduced to more or less by providing undifferentiated bandwidth providers, right? And everything, the content and everything went to OTT. We are at a similar threshold here, right? I think this time around, the CSPs need to be, they are already more cognizant where to partner, where to lose control, and edge is where there is going to be, there is the ongoing battle, right? Where to control and what to control, what is to give to hyperscalers who already have tremendous amount of capabilities at the edge, back end scale, and also with AI ML capabilities and everything else. So they definitely are making a move here. Uh, in this scenario, the challenge for CSP would be how can I get beyond connectivity, and that is where telco cloud helps. If I can have certain use cases that I can get similar kind of scale that other provide, but I can have use cases and I can create a architecture model that is not single cloud like AWS and anything, but a multi-cloud. And then I focus on specific verticals and create those use cases that are that required 4G, 5G, and more capabilities at the edge, then we do definitely have a chance. But with CSPs and telcos, this is going to be a very interesting co-opetition scenario. We would have compete, but I think there would be soon in 2 or 3 years time frame you would see scenarios where CSP is directly competing with telco. We are not there yet with hyperscaler. We are not there yet, but we are going to get there. And one important piece in this scenario in cloud transformation is how do we CSPs attract the developers cloud as a key stakeholder. This is something that we missed, CSPs missed last time around. And that is, if somebody is a developer is really attuned to a particular AWS environment, it is much easier for them to develop in the same environment. How do we attract telco developers to create edge applications that are specific use case for CSPs that have edge cloud and telco cloud built in a multi-cloud environment? That is something going to be a challenge and an opportunity as I see it.
Hey, Sandeep, thank you very much. Yeah, I think, gentlemen, this has been really a very interesting discussion, and I'm sure the viewers, would have noticed that major potential emerging on the telco cloud, as well as the benefits of cost reduction, as well as potential to increase revenue streams, is what eminent panelists shared. So. It gives me much pleasure in thanking David from Ribbon, Suresh from Mavenir, Samar from Nokia, Ryan from Ciena, and Sandeep Dhingra from Sterlite in joining us at this panel. And before I close, some very important developments are also happening. Where the government support is there. So the Ministry of Information Technology has come out with a draft data center policy, and there is the data protection policy is up in the final stages for announcement by the government. So India as a country, both with a combination of the policy front, the regulatory front, as well as investments from the industry, is poised to exploit all these new technologies, and the discussions that we had today for telco cloud, for network transformation is very important. But the last but not the least, two very important points that we always emphasize from COAI. One is the lifeblood of the network. You really need more spectrum to extend all these facilities, and particularly when you go outside, as well as right of way to implement or to get the network together, because you'll not be able to transport all this data generated through digital transformation and all these services. So these are a couple of very important aspects which even the government, through its announcement of the National Broadband Mission and coordination with the state broadband committees, is putting in a lot of effort. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow panelists, thank you very much for sharing your views, as well as all the people who have logged in to listen to this very interesting panel discussion today. And I will close by encouraging you to join the India Mobile Congress, which is scheduled from 8th, 9th, and 10th December. And over a period of 3 days, there will be really very interesting and very engaging discussions that you can benefit from. So with that, thank you very much, and bye-bye.